show here on Pod TV called Economics Monday, and that is with the Honorable David Walker, who is a Comptroller General, and there's been conversations around the military on that show. And we also have, of course, on this show, one of the reasons that we found it is because Nick Valveda and Kim Calhoun thinks that there are a lot of things that are underreported or not reported at all, and there's things that they wish were taught in our school systems, such as fiscal literacy and all along those lines. So how are you doing, Mr. Vine? I'm glad that I was able to get you and everything like that, but I definitely am looking forward to hearing your thoughts around this very important issue, because as long as I can remember, and I'm in my, I'm actually on a week from tomorrow, will be turning 64. So I was born in 62, and I know the military has been a big conversation for decades, probably centuries, and everything like that. So how are you doing, David? And if you'll just tell a little bit about some of the things that you're finding out about what's going on with our military spending and what probably should be going on, because already there's like this notion that our figures could exceed what Trump wanted for the budget, which I think was like 1.5 trillion and all along those lines. But you're saying it could be closer to 3 trillion, which sounds like a lot for the military. And I think about the things that we could be using that for, because I am a big fan of social services and all along those lines. But I'd love to hear more of your research and more about what you were doing in this fight.
You're not alone, Mark. It's a pleasure to be with you, and thank you so much for the invitation. You know, the budgetary matters can put people to sleep real quick in some cases, but I think you're exactly right to paint this as a matter of really ultimately life and death. It's a matter of where the country spends taxpayer dollars, and as we've seen in the past several months, taxpayer dollars have gone to waging a war in Iran that almost no one in the country wanted, that has taken thousands of lives in Iran and Lebanon and U.S. military personnel. And by one estimate, the cost of that war has already reached $72 billion. And I'm sure your listeners, your viewers, can think of better ways we could have spent that $72 billion. I've been concerned about the size of the U.S. military budget for almost 25 years, as long as I've been studying matters of war and peace. It goes back to when the George W. Bush administration launched the global war on terror, as they called it, in the U.S. war in Afghanistan, followed by the war in Iraq. I began following the size of the military budget and watched it just explode, to use a violent metaphor. It ballooned year after year. And in almost every year since, the military budget has gone up by tens and sometimes hundreds of billions of dollars. Some people may be aware, they've heard in the news in the last roughly year, that the Pentagon budget has for the first time exceeded $1 trillion. And that's an enormous amount of money, $1 trillion. It's virtually impossible to conceive of 1 trillion anything, let alone $1 trillion. But we do need to wrap our brains around what $1 trillion means, because that's $1 trillion we're not spending on other things, the needs that people have in their lives, beginning with things like healthcare and rural hospitals and good schools and food to put on the table, childcare and good transportation and far beyond. $1 trillion, unfortunately, is not the full military budget. As I began watching the size of the military budget explode through the past 25 years, I saw that there were a few experts showing that the true total military budget was far larger than what is reported in the news. They were showing that the true total budget was actually up to twice the size of what's reported in the military budget. And this maddened me, made me angry that members of Congress, presidents, and the media were not telling the U.S. American public the full story. We're only providing really a partial total of military spending. So that led me to, with a couple of colleagues, to produce this new report for the Project on Government Oversight, a long respected organization in Washington, D.C. that's been tracking government spending and often government abuses. And in this new report, we show that the true total of U.S. military spending in fiscal year 2025, the last full fiscal year, was 50 to 130% larger than what's reported. So 50 to 130% more than the $1 trillion that's been reported, specifically 1.5 trillion to 2.3 trillion dollars. That's well, it's a scandalous amount of money, because again, this is taxpayer money that is going to our war machine, to fighting endless wars, the wars that President Trump promised to end and that he has clearly not ended. And that's money, again, that is not going to meet the needs of and to defend the security of people here in the United States. We wanted to write this report to make people aware of the true total that we are spending and to change something about that. And that's what I hope the report contributes to.
That makes a lot of sense. I know that you also have this website, and some people will be thinking that we need the military complex. I am actually an advocate of us making some changes in the military industrial complex, but also the prison complex, because they are oftentimes associated with each other and all along those lines. But I was fascinated by your website that is called Dismantle the MIC.org, which is the military industrial complex. And some people would say it's the military industrial prison complex and everything like that. So I was just wondering, because I know that we have both conservatives and liberals that are on this network and everything like that, even though the conservatives haven't been as present as they used to be. I'll just put it that way, and all along those lines. But I was just wondering your thoughts, because I'm sure that some of those will be like, but we've got to have a big military. There might be a threat, and all the other reasons that they give you for needing the military and also needing the prisons, even though we do know that the prisons can be unfair in who is prosecuted and who is staying in them and all along those lines. And yes, I am probably letting some of my bias show and everything like that. But I just wanted your take on this organization of yours, and also this kind of like notion of the website. Because like I said, I did look at it and I was quite fascinated by it. And also the website oversees bases, because we do know that there's been a push to even from Trump to get rid of some of the bases. So I just wanted your thoughts on both of those websites, because I did look at some of your material.
Thank you for doing so. Indeed, there are people across the political spectrum who are concerned about the military-industrial complex. It, of course, was President Eisenhower, Republican president, former five-star general during World War II, who warned the country originally about the military-industrial complex and its power and influence on the country and its ability to influence policy and the daily lives of people. And that is precisely what has happened. His warning has not largely been heeded, but there are people, conservatives, people on the left, who are concerned about the power and influence of the military-industrial complex, or as some call it, the military-industrial congressional complex. This is the complex of the military itself, the Pentagon, especially the Pentagon leadership, and the weapons manufacturers, the war profiteers, the people who've been making money off war, huge sums of money off war every year, and members of Congress who enable this system of continual war profiteering. Several years ago, I got together with a group of folks, activists, advocates, academics, members of veterans organizations, a few journalists and others who were concerned about the military-industrial complex and wanted to do something about it. And that led to the creation of the network to dismantle the military-industrial complex, because we believe that this complex has accumulated so much power that it must be undermined, its power must be rolled back, and ultimately we must dismantle this system that has not served the country, but instead has served the profits largely of the big war profiteers, the weapons makers especially, and a few powerful people who also make careers and benefit financially as well as personally from the military-industrial complex, the high-ranking generals and admirals, the people who work for think tanks that continuously fearmonger, that is drive up the fears of the public about threats, China, Iran, North Korea, to justify out of control military budgets like the one I was talking about before, the now 1.5 trillion to $2.3 trillion military budget that is systematically stealing money from US taxpayers. Could be spent elsewhere, could be spent to improve our daily lives, and instead is going largely to fuel the profits of the war profiteers, the weapons makers, and other Pentagon contractors. One place that the weapons makers, the war profiteers, other Pentagon contractors make huge amounts of money is in maintaining a global network of US military bases. And this has been another focus of my research for almost 25 years. There are now around 800 US military bases encircling the globe. And these bases, again, have been justified as being essential to protecting US national security and the defense of the country. This is almost entirely a myth and has been used to justify jacking up Pentagon budgets to maintain and build and often expand US bases around the world. And these bases instead have not been defensive in nature. They instead have been largely offensive in nature. It has made it easier to wage war in places like Iran, a war that already has cost, by one estimate, $72 billion. And again, I'm sure your listeners, your viewers can think of other ways that $72 billion alone could have been spent. So that has led me in another network to gather with people across the political spectrum who are concerned about the number of US military bases encircling the globe and the impacts that these bases are having, beginning with the wars that they are enabling, the wars that they are making all too easy for powerful people like President Trump, but also Democratic leaders to wage in the past 25 years alone.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense and everything like that. I brought in Rick Rosner, who's one of our regular panelists as well, and is also a member of Mensa and all along those lines, and Dr. Sharif, who is from Bangladesh and all along those lines. But I did see that another organization that you're part of, and I'd love to hear more thoughts around them. And Nick Valveda may be joining us. He's one of the founders of the network, and I did see him pop in, but he hasn't come on camera yet and everything like that. But I was just wondering about this organization called because we all know about the Make America Great slogan, but y'all have an organization that is looking at the Chagossian people and their struggle for justice, and it's saying, let us return USA, which it seems like it's a group of US citizens and others supporting the exiled Chagossian people and their struggle for justice. But I'd love to hear a little bit more about that as well. I know I said I was going to primarily talk about the military industrial complex, and that is what I want to focus on, but I was just fascinated by this organization as well.
It's all connected. It's all connected. And I appreciate your asking about the Chagossian people, people that very few people in the United States or around the world have heard of. Although some people may have heard of the island of Diego Garcia in recent months, because it has been used to launch this war, this illegal, unnecessary war that very few people in the United States want. The vast majority of people in the United States are opposed to, that Trump has waged. Diego Garcia is a small island in the middle of the Indian Ocean that hosts a major U.S. Air Force and Navy base that has played a key role in launching the war against Iran, as well as all the U.S. wars, the catastrophic U.S. wars in the greater Middle East, the wars in Iraq, Afghanistan, and far beyond. And it's a perfect example of how this global collection of around 800 U.S. military bases has not defended the United States, but instead has both enabled U.S. leaders to launch illegal, costly, incredibly deadly wars, while also inflicting tremendous costs on local people. In this case, the reason the United States has a military base on this tiny island, Diego Garcia, is because during the creation of the base in the 1960s and 1970s, the U.S. government, with the help of the British government and a secret $14 million payment, forcibly removed the entire local indigenous people called the Chagossians. The Chagossians had been living on Diego Garcia and the surrounding Chagos Islands since the time of the American Revolution, the descendants of enslaved Africans and indentured Indians. And the US and British government simply deported them 1,200 miles away, dumped them in exile in the western Indian Ocean islands of Mauritius and the Seychelles, and left them there without any resettlement assistance. And they have remained there struggling to go back home to this day, although they're actually, I'm happy to report, closer to going back home than ever before. That is a whole another story, but I appreciate your asking about it. For people wanting to learn more, they can visit the website, letusreturnusa.org, letusreturnusa.org.
Can I mention one other dimension of the ballooning military budget, a lot of which happened after 9/11, and that is that there was a ton of money made available to local police departments to militarize their forces, which I don't know the statistics, but it kind of took a lot of little police departments from kind of like Sheriff Andy Griffith to kind of SWAT team status, which I assume led to more people getting shot.
That's exactly right. This has been another dimension, another cost of the war on terror. The war on terror has led to, indeed, programs that have allowed local police departments and sheriffs to buy, or in some cases just acquire for free, effectively, excess military hardware, sometimes including tanks and other hardware that you'd only see on the battlefield. And that has helped turn U.S. streets into battlefields. And indeed, there is some research linking that to police killings and police violence. The Costs of War Project, which is another project that I'm part of out of Brown University, has been documenting the many human and financial costs of the post 9/11 wars, the war on terror, as George W. Bush called it, including the way in which the war on terror has militarized local police forces in exactly the way you mentioned, Rick.
Hey, David, just really quickly, we've got Dr. Sharif here as well. I know that you've also written a book called Base Nation, and it looks at how the U.S. military bases abroad harm Americans and the world. And Dr. Sharif does come from Bangladesh and all along those lines. So I'd love to hear your thoughts around the impact. And we've also got Sasha Starr, who is originally from Ukraine, served in the Russian army way back when, or the Soviet Union army, I should say, to be correct, and all along those lines, but is definitely a supporter of the Ukrainian freedom fighters and all in that kind of way, but he now lives in Canada. But I was just wondering your take on how these bases are still around the various parts of the world. I do know that there's been talks about moving some of them out of Europe and everything like that. But I do know that this notion of your book, and it's called Base Nation, how U.S. military bases abroad harm not just America, but the world, because it's actually titled Bases Abroad Harm America and the World. But I'd love to hear some more thoughts around that from your perspective. And David and Dr. Sharif and Sasha may have some questions for you as well.
Diego Garcia, this island in the middle of the Indian Ocean that helped launch the war in Iran and that is responsible for exiling the indigenous Chagosian people now more than 60 years ago, was the island and the military base that really opened my eyes to this global network of military bases encircling the globe, now numbering around 800 U.S. bases around the world outside the 50 states and Washington, D.C. And it opened my eyes to the role that these bases were playing in the world. For years, I'd been hearing that these bases were essential to protecting U.S. national security and the defense of the world and peace and global harmony. These are myths, I quickly learned. The track record shows, history shows that U.S. bases around the world have been critical infrastructure for launching a long series of really endless wars, not just in the last 25 years, but in particular since World War II, since the growth of the military-industrial congressional complex. And my most recent book, The United States of War, shows that actually foreign military bases outside U.S. territory have played a key role in launching U.S. wars and enabling the expansion of the United States really since independence. The first U.S. bases abroad, the first foreign U.S. bases, were of course on Native American soil, and they played a key role in allowing the U.S. military to conquer lands and peoples and dispossess, of course, millions of Native Americans, which of course involved the murder and genocide of millions of Native Americans across the continent. U.S. bases then began expanding beyond the North American continent to places like the Philippines, Guam, Puerto Rico, Cuba, and beyond. And this enabled the expansion of the United States on a global basis that only expanded with World War II. Why this entire system, this not just for the sake of expansion, my research has consistently shown that big corporations, big business, including war profiteers, have benefited, meaning the weapons manufacturers, those have benefited directly from U.S. military budgets, have been the main beneficiaries of this system of war over and over. And this is precisely what we need to change.
I have a couple questions about the bases. One is, I assume that, like, if you still read the newspaper, you'll see a steady trickle of like rape cases stemming from troops at these bases getting shit-faced and then raping the natives. But are there any positive effects of these bases? There was a goofy sitcom on Fox where Dennis Leary is the commander of one of these bases set in the Netherlands, and they just had fun and ate cheese together, which is obviously ridiculous, kind of semi-propaganda. But so China does Belt and Road Initiative, which is China's effort to kind of become the world's friend and push in where we're pulling back. So the bases, do they serve any positive?
I haven't seen the show, but it does sound like propaganda indeed. There are, of course, some positive benefits of U.S. bases around the world, including the relationships, sometimes quite positive relationships between locals, and often some locals have very fond feelings for local bases, especially in Europe, I would say. In other parts of the world, the relationships in places like Okinawa, other parts of Japan, have been much more tense, and indeed there is a long record of U.S. military personnel committing crimes, including rape, sexual assault, getting in accidents that have taken lives. Of course, that involves a small minority of U.S. military personnel. But when this is a foreign military presence, it doesn't matter how many people are committing crimes or get in accidents. This tends to make people really, really pissed off. And I think those of us who live in the United States or live anywhere can imagine how we might feel if we were living next to a foreign military base, and if those military personnel on the base were committing crimes. This is just the beginning of the harmful impacts that U.S. bases have around the world. The environmental impact is another form of harm that frequently makes people understandably very angry. There's actually a South Korean movie that begins with U.S. Army personnel dumping toxic chemicals in the river that runs through Seoul, the capital of South Korea. And this actually happened. In the movie, it leads to the creation of a sea monster. But this is based on a true story and is emblematic of the kind of environmental harm that U.S. bases cause around the world, sometimes through intentional dumping, like we saw in Seoul, South Korea, but often just through daily accidental environmental contamination because of the huge amounts of toxics and hazardous waste, hazardous materials that U.S. bases, both in the United States and outside the United States, entail. And this also, is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the harmful impacts of bases. We do need to return to the way in which U.S. bases around the world have enabled wars, and especially the endless wars fought since the George W. Bush administration launched the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. The number of U.S. bases around the world has fluctuated. Went up, particularly during the height of the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. The Belt and Road Initiative that China has launched in the past decades has been indeed a way for the Chinese government to increase its influence around the world and to make money around the world. The US government has largely responded to the rise of Chinese power, economic and political power, through a military response. The US number of US bases has actually expanded around the world, or the parts of the world where you find US bases has expanded, especially in places like Africa and some parts of Asia, to a lesser extent in Latin America. And this has been a way to respond to the Chinese presence, but has largely been one that has been incredibly wasteful and has gotten the US military involved in yet more disastrous wars and forms of combat, especially in places in Africa, while the Chinese military has largely remained confined to China itself, and the Chinese government has gone about making plenty of money through strategic investments around the world.
Sasha has a question for you. That's the gentleman from Canada with his hand up and everything like that. So, Sasha.
Okay, I'm going to talk about European bases and whether it makes sense today or not, because we are not at the end of Second World War, where Europe was impoverished and basically destroyed, and they need any help, anything from the United States that they could provide. It's no longer a picture today. Now, U.S. bases, let's see, in the Middle East. Oh, look at that. So they started the war against Iran. So the U.S. client states, all those Kuwait and Arab Emirates and whatever else, Kuwait, Bahrain, whatever, and they had U.S. military bases. And they could not defend their military bases against Iran, and they could not defend these client states. I don't know, after that, I'm very skeptical about this $300 billion fund for Iran that this states will provide. This is a joke. Actually, Iranians are very shrewd negotiators, by the way. What they're saying now is, okay, so if you will do this and that, that and that, okay, so you will give us $300 billion. Okay, so these funds are being accumulated somewhere in a bank. So there's, let's see, now there is only $1 billion, and then next week it will be $10 billion, and then 100, and then so on. Show us, please, the bank account where these money are coming now. Because if they're not coming now, forget about $300 billion. You will not even get $300. Just get lost and stop it. And I'm very curious how this great strategist J.D. Vance and great President Donald Trump, how was they going to say what's happened? Where's the money? Show me the money. No, there isn't. Well, we are going to provide the money. Provide it right now, or just get lost and get away from here. Now, about Europe. While Europe was defenseless and in ruins after Second World War, it's a very different entity today. It's a very rich, very cultural, very well defended. By the way, they have a lot of, let's see, for example, airplanes. Okay, they have France Mirage, and they have some other Scandinavian manufacturers, Saab. So they're getting very capable airplanes. It's a questionable whether F-35 is better than the European planes, because maybe they are better somewhat, but they're like way much more expensive. So you have to really think, for example, Canada going for Saab fighters, not the F-35. So now we are getting a situation that these bases, the military bases in Europe, they are redundant. They don't serve any purpose but just please. Can you cut the noise? Thank you. They redundant. They don't serve any purpose. They just eliminate local population in any country, whether it's Italian or Germany or anywhere. And there are all kind of threats that we are going to cut this basis and we're going to remove 5,000 people here, and next day it's another 3,000 or so on. Oh, Maloney, she's full of shit, and she's not really a friend for the United States. Oh, the Starmer, he is going to resign. Starmer couldn't even say himself. the Trump conducted everything. Okay, this guy resigned. This girl is nothing, and so on. With a policy like this, with the president and the administration like that, who needs European bases? They cannot defend even themselves. Say hello and say thanks to Ukraine. If it wouldn't be for Ukraine, yes, Russians could advance against Western Europe or so on and so on. And even in that case, these bases would be redundant because they would not be able to defend themselves. The same thing like in Iranian war, all those U.S. client states. That's all what I want to say. They're redundant. It's basically Pentagon to me is a big money laundering machine, because they're asking, give us half $1 trillion here and maybe another trillion here. For what? For dinners, lobster and steaks? For what they're asking for money? All they need to have $50 million budget to defend themselves against Canada and Mexico. That's all what U.S. needs. Just get away from all over the world. You cannot afford it. You are underwater $40 trillion. United States is the most obnoxious beggar in this world. Give us 300 billion, give us this and that and that. Just get lost and get away, please.
That's a view from Canada and everything. David, I definitely want to hear from you as well and all along those lines. But I did see that Nick had joined us. Nick used to live in the United States and is now living in Spain. So he's one of those expatriates and is one of the founders of TP along with Kim Calhoun. So he may have some ideas around the notion of military and military industrial complex and anything like that. Because I know we've only got you for about 43 minutes. So I think we have to bounce for another show shortly. But I definitely wanted you to have the opportunity to hear from Nick as well.
Yeah, I agree with Sasha that we don't need military bases in Europe. I live in Barcelona and I moved here about 2 years ago. Just the time you were bringing in this new president, whatever it is. Anyway, the thing is, last time you asked to use our bases, we said no, and that was to take the planes and use Spain as a place to launch from to attack Iran. They said no. And by the way, Italy said no too. And the European Union is big, 423 million people, bigger than the United States is the EU, even without England, Scotland, Wales, and the Brexit people. So, but the economy isn't as big. The GDP is less. However, it has some metrics that are better than the US. Longevity in Spain is like age 84. In the US, it's like 78. So, and then student debt. You guys have student debt up the kazoo. Here, college is basically free. So you don't have those types of stress and pressure that people are upon them. And what Sasha was saying is true. You think 1 trillion is bad in military spending. As David Walker says, we spend 1 trillion a year on interest on the debt, which we get nothing for. And the US is about 40 trillion in debt. Then we have unfunded Social Security and unfunded Medicare liabilities, which, as we know, Social Security runs out of money in 2032 and Medicare runs out in 2033. And the liabilities are close to $80 trillion. So, yeah, the military is just one part of a completely, how you say, mismanaged from a financial planning standpoint, U.S. government. So it's not if it's going to collapse, it's when is it going to collapse? And then what are people going to do when it does? Because you can't just keep doing this and expect to have a different result. So yeah, I think military is one part of it. And of course, then I look at maybe I should invest in Northrop Grumman, maybe I should invest in Lockheed Martin, but I'm too late to the party. The stock's already been bid up once Trump got elected. So I can't even make money on the other side of this equation right now. But yeah, there are big companies like Lockheed Martin and Northrop Grumman that benefit tremendously from having, conflicts that exist around the world. Oh, and also something funny. Okay, Fox bought Roku. We have 4 channels on Roku. And I was just thinking while I was listening to you, okay, so when they buy Roku, we're going to be on Fox. And I know a lot of people here, this is going to be very interesting. The question is, yeah, we're going to be on Fox, but how long are we going to last on Fox? I don't know. But we'll see. The world is yet to be played out. I think it'll be fun.
Those lines and everything, because I do want to give David a chance to end and everything like that, because I know he told me he could give me about 14 minutes.
We haven't heard from Dr. Sharif yet either.
And
Dr. Sharif from from Bangladesh, one of our important partners.
Yeah, thank you. This is very interesting discussions as you are discussing about this military investment in USA. And yes, USA has the largest military investment around the world. And secondly, what we are observing this military industrial complex, what I see from Bangladesh as I work with MIST, Military Institute of Science and Technologies in Bangladesh, I find that that we have a very good interaction with the USA. And after these revolutions of Bangladesh, especially the youth peoples, Dr. Mohammad Yunus government, they make a very big deals with USA and Bangladesh. Bangladesh will buy different kind of equipment and air and many more things from USA. But here is the issues like what I see in the present world. There are a lot of complexities because of the huge investment of the militaries and so on. If you see this Asia Pacific, specifically this Middle East market, still there is a deal in between Iran and USA. But we do not know what is the deal in between Israel and Iran. The same way we are observing because of this military interaction, there are tension and problems in Russia and so on. So what we can do, definitely we need defense. Even Bangladesh has challenges. Right now we are observing from India, they are pushing, they are pushing Muslim communities to Bangladesh. So what is happening? Yes, after the Trump administration comes, he heavily utilizing this nationalism and so on. And for that particular issues, country like India, Bangladesh, these everywhere, there are war, there is a conflict, there is a political tension, there is a misinformation, disinformation, social media. People are full of tired with this war, with this COVID, and with this so on. So I think we need to go for a better deal for this planet. We need to go for better innovation for this planet. And we need to work together, those who have intellectual ability, those who have empathy and sympathy for these global communities. And by this way, we can save this planet. Military industrial complexity, this billions and trillions dollars, I can understand. But some point I do not understand that why don't we invest on humanity? Why don't we invest on human progressions? Why don't we do not invest enough in education and healthcare? So even country like Bangladesh, we have a very small country compared to USA, but we have our own budget. Also in this budget, we are observing that we cannot ask any question for the military budget. We cannot, we do not know actually what's going on with this money and everything. So I think we need a very specific, transparent process. We need to focus on humanity. We need to care about our healthcare, our climate issues, our educational issues, and so on. That is the way of global peace. So global peace deals is very important for us. And that's why we are promoting these wisdom affairs, this World Talent Economic Forum. We need good leader who has wisdom, like empathy and sympathy. With this military and so on, you cannot do anything. You're observing in the Iran, right? The wire and nothing is happening. The same way, we need to create a peacekeeping missions. We need to create more negotiation like this, and we need to create a like ecosystem in between global north and global south. That is the solution for my point of view. Thank you, everyone.
So, David, what are some feasible reforms to the U.S. military, U.S. bases on foreign soil, and I guess throw in U.S. aid if in 2.5 years we get a president who's not a lunatic?
A great
Just
question.
quickly, I know.
I think this entire conversation points to the opportunity for change that we have right now. And the debacle of the war in Iran offers an opportunity for change, because the people in the United States, as I mentioned, are overwhelmingly opposed to this war. And, part of the reason President Trump got elected was because he promised to end the endless wars. He promised to be the peace president. He actually promised to take on the military-industrial complex. He has done the exact opposite. I think the struggle begins actually right now. Trump has asked for the largest military budget in U.S. history, a 50% increase on the U.S. military budget. Now, what he has officially asked for is $1.5 trillion. That's incomprehensible sum of money. And I think Sasha was exactly right in describing the war system and the military-industrial complex as a kind of money laundering system, in the sense that it is funneling money to weapons manufacturers, Pentagon contractors of all sorts, and people who are profiting off war, profiting off the endless wars. This is exactly what Trump actually promised to take on, because he realized that, as long as people like Northrop Grumman and Lockheed Martin are making money on every missile that's fired, every bomb that's dropped, you're going to get more war. Trump is asking for yet more money to wage war. And right now in Congress, they are debating the size of the military budget for next year. Trump has asked for a 50% increase. Now, this recent report that I have published with a couple co-authors at the Project on Government Oversight has shown that the actual size of the military budget is far larger than what Trump is asking for. It's somewhere between 1.5 and 2.3 trillion dollars already. 1.5 trillion and 2.3 trillion dollars already, because of money that's hidden in other government budgets. But we have to oppose this scandalous increase that would actually take the total military spending to around $3 trillion a year, $3 trillion a year. So again, sums that are unfathomable, but we have to wrap our brain around it, because that's money that's not being spent on the needs of people here at home, beginning with healthcare, good schools, childcare, food, and many, many more, as well as the needs around the world, which, to come back to another question you raised, points to the need to fundamentally transform the way the United States engages with the rest of the world. And I think there is a hunger for this, because people across the political spectrum are sick and tired of endless wars, and they want money invested in communities here at home. Some people would like to see money invested in the communities and lives of people around the world. I certainly would. And I think this is a time that is ripe for a fundamentally new vision for U.S. foreign policy, the way the United States engages with the rest of the world, which would require the closure of most, if not all, U.S. bases outside the United States, a military focused on defending actually the United States and U.S. borders, and different modes of engagement around the world. It wouldn't require a kind of isolationism, but instead engagement with other countries and people around the world based around diplomacy, peace building, negotiations, cultural exchange, educational exchange, economic exchange, rather than military exchange. The symbol of the United States around the world is largely, McDonald's, Hollywood, and military bases. And we need to change this, as well as the entire war system, an economy that has revolved around permanent warfare that has benefited the likes of Northrop Grumman, Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, and other Pentagon contractors, increasingly AI and other tech giants are making huge profits off the war system. We need to take that money and invest it in people's lives here in the United States and around the world, and demand something fundamentally different, beginning with the struggle over the Pentagon budget for next year. So I'd urge listeners in the United States to call their members of Congress and say, we don't want a single nickel of additional spending going to the Pentagon next year. We want the Pentagon budget cut, and this will help undermine the war system and end, finally, the endless wars.
David, everything what you described is absolutely right, but you are well aware that it's not going to happen under this administration and this president. And they are too powerful, too entrenched into the all corridors of powers. And until at least midterm election this November, nothing will change, and everything what you're trying to do, unfortunately, is doomed. It's not going to work out, because even if you will press your constituents and your representatives to vote for this, and they will say, okay, maybe we will, maybe we will not, and they will change, depends on the circumstances, because all they care is just to get reelected and keep their salary of, say, $175,000 a year and free parking at the Dulles Airport. They cherish this too much to do something unusual. And even if they're Republicans, they know that in next election Trump will back their enemies and Congress, and so this situation until midterm election, and I really don't see how it turns around. Now about budget, okay, whether it's 1 trillion, 2 trillion, 3 trillion, $5 trillion, all this works when you have competent people at the top, and if you don't, it doesn't matter how much money you're going to put it in there, it's not going to work. And right now in Pentagon, they're highly incompetent people. They are fighting the war of 20th century, while Ukraine and even Iran are fighting war of 21st century. They know a symmetrical response, and they know how well they do it. So US now is begging for peace. And Iranians know that they cannot invade, they cannot continue bombing, so they extract more and more from these poor US negotiators who never negotiated with the real world. Iranian people are real world. That's how in Asia people bargain for whether it's a carpet or whether it's something else. They know how to negotiate, they know power game. And United States are incompetent. They cannot do it. They have to get their stuff out of there and go home, please.
It's good to have friends in Canada. That's all I can say.
You know what? Instead of Department of War, maybe we need to create a Department of Peace and focus on peace. But I just want to add here about the conversation that we're having, because, you know, you're talking about David, some points that we need to focus on to make America what it needs to be. I'm not ever going to use the other term, but we need to get focused again. David Walker talks about this consistently on his show every Monday at 11 a.m. So let's talk about something that I learned in my journey, learning how to become a better speaker, working with a lot of big corporations, going to the stage, and we were told to focus on 3 things. Just keep it to 3 things and repeat them over and over and over. So if you notice, Trump is really good about repeating the same thing over and over and over. You know, I didn't really lose. I was cheated. So you hear everything 3 or 4 times every time he gets on stage. Okay. That is called conditioning. Okay. That's called grooming. I don't like to use it because I know what it is, but if you want to get your point across, 3 things. I would listen to my husband, and one of the things would make me laugh. He'd go, there are 3 things that make me happy in life. They don't necessarily come in order. And he would list them. And I'm going to tell you guys, because But in most men's mind, I'm sure it's the truth, and it's beer, food, and sex. Okay. And, he would say, nature likes to propagate, Kim, think about it. So, not that I needed to be reminded, it was just a constant joke, but it was 3 things that I'll never forget, right? 3. So when we're saying that we need to get back to a new platform, people are all over right now. They've been distracted by a million different things. Trump is the world's best at this. Look at me over here. Look at me over here. I mean, one of the biggest examples of his success rate is that reflection pool. And that reflection pool is reflecting what America is right now. It is telling us what we are. We're a failure. Okay, you just don't go in and paint on over a foundation, any kind of chemical, silicone or anything, and think you're going to fix the foundation of the problem. So think of 3 things we really, really need to focus on and go to our senators with and stay focused on those 3 things. That I hate bill pushing because every bill starts out maybe with a couple of things. The next thing you know, it's a 3,000-page bill with every agenda. I don't think any bill should be more than 5 pages. None should be more than 5 pages. If it's one individual thing at a time, then one individual thing at a time. Majority of the senators are not even reading the simple bills because it's just overload. 3 things. Always remember to keep it as simple as 3. We need to get our financial situation under control. We need to end the wars, and we need to start feeding our people again. And when people start to go hungry, we don't learn. Okay. When we become uneducated, we become overwhelmed, and people can take us over. So the real most important thing of humans is we need to eat. Period. Nourishment. We need good nourishment, not toxins, good food. All right. They've taken that off the table. They've made it unaffordable. I hate saying this because not all immigrants worked on the farms, but they took away our means when they took the immigrants out of the equation. Okay. So look at what's going on, and this is how they've taken over countries. Albania is a big issue right now. Go Albania. Albania is like a family to me. I love them. They worked their way out of communism, and back in 1997, they ran the communists out of their country. Unfortunately, those cockroaches came to ours. Okay, because I asked them, well, where did they all go? Why didn't you just execute them or get rid of them? They came to our country. That's where majority of the communists came. They came here for safety and security.
Wait,
Okay.
Kimberly, I'm sorry. You were a breath of fresh air until you started describing people as cockroaches, unless I misunderstood you. I was loving what you were
Communists,
saying.
not people, communists. They're not humans to me. Communists.
Well, that's really disturbing. I really appreciated what you were saying before about the need to fundamentally transform our country. And I think there's a real hunger for that, for people who want to invest our taxpayer dollars in nourishing people's lives here in the United States and around the world, and cutting the size of the Pentagon budget dramatically while ending the endless wars, what Trump promised to do, and closing US military bases around the world. I think these are critical steps. But I think part of the system of permanent war and a permanent war economy has depended on the kind of dehumanizing language of others that is fundamentally very troubling to me. Yes, there are people in communist regimes in Europe and elsewhere who did despicable things, but to describe all communists as cockroaches, or really any human beings as cockroaches, is very troubling, and has been used in actual genocides to describe people as insects and rodents. So I'm deeply troubled by that, but I appreciated everything you said up until that moment. I apologize that I'm going to have to leave.
Well, before you go, can you tell us how
to
get more information from you?
I will indeed. Indeed, my books, including The United States of War, Base Nation, and Island of Shame. More information is available about them and all the projects I'm involved in on my website, davidvine.net. davidvine.net. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dick. Thank you. And point taken. I will refrain from calling communist cockroaches. They came over here like cockroaches. They came over here like that. But yep. Well, everyone, I guess it's the end of the day. We are heading out. I hope everyone is doing well. Please take care until we see you tomorrow. 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Take care.